From the headquarters of Telesur English in Caracas, Venezuela, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We start with Brazil, where the campaign is heating up ahead of the presidential, legislative, and regional elections on October 7th. Presidential candidates held a debate on Thursday night. They talked about the fight against corruption, the need to change the political system, and a labor reform, among other issues. Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad pledged to revoke the labor law, after considering that it weakens the rights of the working class. Haddad also rejected the freezing of public investment.
The second ethical aspect in politics is to favor the poorest. After health services home from those who do not have homes, the social programs of government should be directed for all, but specifically for those who need them the most. That is why it is important to consider the poorest and fight corruption. For 12 years of democratic stability, we generated 20 million of jobs in 12 years. The government of the PSDB president admitted last week that against his own convictions, he sabotaged the country, not just the government, but his country, generating the crisis in which we are in today. On October 6th, the people will vote again.
First-time candidate for the Socialism and Liberty Party and leader of the Homeless Workers Movement, or MTST, Guilherme Boulos, also spoke about Brazil's inequality.
No family without a house, no workers without food and rights. Social equality essential for any country. Brazil is not only living an economic crisis, not only a political crisis, but it also lives a moral crisis where ethical values are the center that guides politics and life. We have to restore this, not only with words, it is necessary to do so with actions. There is a need for deep political reform in Brazil. We must face the truth that the public power is being held hostage by private interests, which are manifested in electoral campaigns through economic interests, businessmen, bankers, agricultural business, finances, elections, campaigns, and then come to collect favors. That is something we must end.
Our correspondent, André Vieira, brings us a report on the campaign from Rio de Janeiro.
With just over 2 weeks to go until the general elections here in Brazil on the 7th of October, the candidates are stepping up their campaigns. Fernando Haddad, the presidential candidate of the Workers' Party, or PT, the candidate backed by Lula da Silva, is campaigning hard in Sao Paulo, Brazil's most populous state, with the largest concentration of votes. Haddad has the big challenge of letting people know that he is Lula's candidate and of getting them to transfer to him the voting intentions that Lula had before and which made him the favorite to win. Haddad is standing alongside Manuela Dávila of the Communist Party of Brazil as his running mate for vice president. Recent polls show Haddad consolidating his second place. On Wednesday, the pollster Datafolha published a poll which gave Haddad 16% of the vote, behind the far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro with 28%. But Bolsonaro is also the candidate who has the highest rejection rate of voters who say they will never vote for him. For example, a poll by Ibope showed that 55% of women in Brazil would never vote for Bolsonaro. On the 29th of this month, a big rally is planned against Bolsonaro with the name Women Against Bolsonaro to reject his sexist and homophobic views. We're also expecting protests in other parts of the world against Bolsonaro, calling for Brazil not to follow this path of the neo-fascist right.
That was André Vieira from Brazil. Mônica Benício, the widow of murdered councilwoman Marielle Franco, has condemned the Brazilian government at the United Nations. Benicio spoke with representatives from the UN's Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, on Wednesday. She condemned the indifference shown by the state towards the murder, which took place in March this year. 6 months later, justice has yet to be served. Pensioners in Argentina have been protesting outside Congress against the government's economic policies. The demonstrators are marking Pensioners' Day by demanding that lawmakers declare an emergency to the sector. They say the cuts agreed between President Mauricio Macri and the International Monetary Fund are making their lives impossible. Let's go to our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, who was at the protest.
The pensioners have been holding an important demonstration, both to celebrate their day and to reflect on the very difficult situation here. With this economic crisis that's hitting the entire population very hard, pensioners are among the worst affected because of the benefits they have lost. As a result of the pension reform approved by the government majority in Congress last December that took away $5 million, supposedly it was to go to the provincial governments, but they got rid of free medicines and other social and health benefits. At the same time, the increase in pensions is not enough to keep up with inflation. Even though that's supposed to be guaranteed by law, President Mauricio Macri is not respecting it. So it's a complicated situation which people are confronting here in the front of Congress on a day that was meant to be a celebration, but is now one reflection on the struggle ahead to achieve a decent old age in Argentina.
On Thursday, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro presented a balance on the first month of the country's economic recovery plan.
That came out of those 30 days is that the economy is strong and active 24 hours a day, attending to the 10 strategy points that I launched with the economic recovery plan. I can say that after 30 days, we have taken a gigantic step towards balancing the economy. Our financial system has been affected by the economic war, the sanctions, persecutions, and financial blockade from the United States. We are now mending a broken economy and inching closer to the financial stability.
In Colombia, Senator Roy Barreras is questioning statements about military intervention in Venezuela made by the country's ambassador to the United States, Francisco Santos.
We are also concerned about the statement of the new Colombian ambassador in Washington, Dr. Francisco Santos, who said a few hours ago that he does not rule out the Colombian government as part of what they call the solution in Venezuela, a military intervention added to the inexplicable actions of the signature of the Republic of Colombia in the letter of Lima. We are concerned about why this commission is the peace commission and the peace commission above the wars.
Colombia's Congress is divided over the decision by President Iván Duque to strip power from peace negotiators. Some lawmakers have called this decision the beginning of the end for the ongoing peace talks with the ELN. Others justify this decision, saying that this is a normal procedure for any kind of negotiation. The government has previously said any agreement with the National Liberation Army will be conditioned to the release of any kidnapped victims. Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has congratulated Congress after it passed a vote of confidence in his anti-corruption reforms. Vizcarra said the lawmakers had made a commitment to him and to 30 million Peruvians to approve his 4 reform bills. This will be put to a referendum vote on December 9th. Coming up, more stories. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thousands in Guatemala have protested once again against President Jimmy Morales and in defense of the International Commission Against Impunity. The demonstration in the center of Guatemala City was led by students and joined by campesinos, workers, and a number of social movements. They want the president to step down after he suspended the work of the UN Anti-Graft Commission and ban its head from the country.
The demand is the resignation of President Jimmy Morales because the people, organizations and communities have really realized that he has become the spokesman for the corruption and impunity of this country.
He ignores the needs of the people, acts in his own interest. He gained power by sheer luck. He deceived the people of Guatemala because they voted for him, believing that he was the better option.
Now,
what we are witnessing is a situation that could possibly be a coup. And what happens is that the country's democracy, constitutional guarantees, and human rights are in danger.
And it's not just about Jimmy Morales, it's about that block of impunity around both the executive power and the Congress, which with their actions are seeking to guarantee impunity.
In Costa Rica, the dialogue between the government and unions continues after a mobilization achieved the suspension of the fiscal reform that was discussed in Congress. Strikers had blocked the main streets of the capital in order to request the withdrawal of the tax reform. Protesters had claimed that the measure affected mainly the poorest, reduced social assistance plans, and lowered taxes on the wealthiest. Representatives of the government had this to say.
Today we met with the government team at the Social School Juan 23. We are continuing our preliminary approach with the union unit as we did yesterday. The government of the Republic has been clear and emphatic in that we believe in the way of the dialogue to solve national conflicts. So we hope that with these preliminary meetings we can move towards a new phase, where we hope to install a dialogue table to make a negotiation with that will allow us to reach eventual agreement and consensus.
Mexico marked 1 year since a 7.1 earthquake killed 228 people in the capital and 141 more around the country. And just hours before Mexico's earthquake memorial, security forces violently evicted residents of a central neighborhood in Mexico City. 100 police officers in riot gear were deployed to evict people squatting outside a building damaged by last year's earthquake. Dozens of civilians were left injured after violent clashes broke out. The victims say they were supposed to enter the building to reclaim their possessions, but were surprised by the arrival of the police. Most of those affected belong to the indigenous community of Otomi.
They didn't have an eviction order. They just arrived and started attacking everyone. They hit a number of women, they even hit children. That is beyond unjust.
We are here because we don't have the resources to go anywhere else.
Students in Mexico have been protesting over the disappearance of 43 students 4 years ago. The protesters threw Molotov cocktails at the Army headquarters in Iguala, where the students from Ayotzinapa were last seen. The government says they were killed and incinerated by a drug gang, but the families and supporters of the students have repeatedly rejected that version. They suspect that the Army was involved. In El Salvador, cyclists are changing the future of urban mobility. One non-profit organization called Bici Red believes the rise in commuter cycling demands the urgent restructuring of urban planning and a lot of thinking.
It's an incentive to get pedaling. Cycling, it's a healthy form of exercise, an efficient means of transportation, and it doesn't harm the environment. It's no wonder bicycles are reclaiming their space on the crowded streets of South America. Members of Bicide are pioneering a two-wheel revolution. That's why they're urging government to move full speed ahead with the passage of legislation to ensure cyclist safety.
¿Cuál es la ventaja de utilizar la bicicleta, verdad?
What is the advantage of using the bike from the health point of view, from the nature, environment point of view? It does not contribute to the climate change. Also is good from the economic and the traffic view, because where a car parks, 20 bicycles fit.
Fíjese que donde usted parquea un vehículo, puede parquear 20 bicicletas.
Parliamentarians were invited to get pedalling in the streets of El Salvador, but cycling safety can be a two-way street. The city is usually crammed with cars letting out exhaust fumes, and the reality is there are dangers facing cyclists on city roads.
Hay mucho accidente de tránsito, los automovilistas casi no respetan al motociclista.
There are a lot of car accidents. Car drivers don't respect motorcycles or bicycles, and the risk is higher for them. I think we should work in this proposal to promote the use of the bike as a way to help the environment. But we also have to establish terms that assure the respect of the cyclist.
Paralelamente habría que establecer las condiciones que garanticen el respeto al ciclista.
Meanwhile, lawmakers are giving urban cyclists the assurance that they're not about to backpedal on legislation to protect them on sometimes hostile streets.
In a few days, we are gonna have the approval, because virtually it was fully discussed, and the proposals of this law are not only benefits for the cyclists, but also to the environment protection.
Sino también de proteger el medio ambiente a través del uso de la bicicleta.
During Cyclist Week, the public invited to take part in a range of activities, including rides with other Salvadorian bicycle groups. They're not reinventing the wheel, but they're hoping to change the face of urban commuting.
Now to the Caribbean, where a day after Barbados' central bank announced details of its debt restructuring plan, opposition media is claiming that the government is bankrupt. The reprofiling means people could lose money as they will get less returns on their investments in the form of government bonds. But the government has said earlier that there was no alternative to tackle the country's massive debt burden. Thursday marked 1 year since Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico. Residents have endured hardships during the past year, with the federal government offering minimal assistance. Hurricane Maria, which was the strongest to make landfall in 85 years, destroyed homes, uprooted trees, and caused widespread flooding. The official death toll is 2,975, but studies have said the numbers are higher. The collapse of the electrical grid, the loss of communications, and blocked roads made it impossible for many of the elderly in the rural areas to access medical care. Even now, NGOs across the island continue to identify vulnerable patients. While the power grid was finally fully restored in August, it remains unstable.
We wanted them to be safe so when the electricity was gone, they could continue doing the therapies, the dialysis, without being worried that they could lose power while being connected and then switching to manual. It's a very tedious process and a dangerous one as well, going from electric to manual. Puerto Rico is rising on its own without the government's help. It's been helped by those Puerto Ricans that live abroad and other parts of the world.
We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. Welcome back. On the final day of the Inter-Korean Summit, South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un joined hands on Mount Paektu, North Korea's mythical mountain. Moon toured the site before joining Kim. Following the visit, he attended a farewell lunch with Kim before returning to his country. The leaders have agreed to turn the Korean peninsula into a land of peace without weapons or nuclear threats. The first female president of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Singiso Alosi, is emphasizing the rights of women at workplace. She was speaking at the closing ceremony of the fourth day and the summit in Johannesburg.
Women within the ranks of this radical trade union movement are ready to take the responsibility at the sharpest end of the struggles of emancipation of all women in our society. We're gearing ourselves, comrades, to occupy the front ranks and cold face as the organized and class consciousness detachment of the broader working class women.
The Muslim Shia community in Lebanon marked the Ashura festival by taking part in a self-flagellation ritual. During a public procession, men beat their chests and cut themselves with knives and swords. Ashura is the day of mourning for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein ibn Ali, a grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. The act of self-flagellation and beating one's self is symbolic of the grieving process. And protesters in Pakistan burned Israeli and U.S. flags during their annual Ashura procession in Karachi. Thousands of Houthi supporters rallied in Yemen's capital on Thursday to celebrate the 4th anniversary of the movement's takeover of Sana'a. The Houthi takeover took place after protests forced President Ali Abdullah Saleh to retire. Every year, Houthi followers mark the occasion with a rally.
Where we demonstrated our rejection of injustice to show our support to the freedom fighters and to show that we are taking the same path that Hussein ibn Ali took against injustice from the first day.
These people are free and came out today to state clearly that they will not succumb to the occupation and won't surrender to the US, Saudi Arabia and the UAE and USA.
In Palestine, there has been international rejection to the attacks of the Israeli forces against Palestinians in the last 48 hours. They're demanding the end of violence against innocent civilians. Nayara Tardo has more information.
Over the last 48 hours, Israeli forces have increased attacks on Palestinians in both the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. Between the night of the 17th and 18th of September, 6 Palestinians were killed by Israelis. All were young people between 16 and 18 years of age, all of which were unarmed civilians. For this reason, several civil organizations, including the Organization for the Liberation of Palestine to the international community, want to put an end to the threat of Palestinian lives and to abandon their double discourse on the loss of lives regardless of the nationality or religion. Hanan Hashrawi was referring to The Hague. He also said that the murders are further proof that the Palestinians require urgent protection against the criminal campaign and decades of military occupation of Palestine.
Nayara Tardo from Egypt. Thousands protested in Barcelona to demand the release of pro-independence political leaders. The march marked the first anniversary of a police raid on Catalan government offices ahead of the vote to gain independence from Spain. The protesters held flags of Catalonia and banners showing jailed politicians. They shouted "Libertad presos polítics" to demand the freedom of political prisoners. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's last interview before his communication was cut off from the Ecuadorian embassy in London has been published. That interview was recorded in March 2018. The video was broadcasted during the World Ethical Data Forum in Barcelona, Spain. Assange has been held in that diplomatic mission since 2012. He said Western culture needs outlets like WikiLeaks to protect citizens and freedom of speech against corporations.
WikiLeaks became a culturally established, such that there would be a tremor sent through the broader internet culture, which is now the broader Western culture, if WikiLeaks were to disappear. And that's a very difficult role to be in. What would it mean? It would mean that essentially the envelope for publishers and freedom of speech and the rights of citizens versus institutions and establishments would suddenly contract. So I personally and WikiLeaks are partly in the business of keeping the envelope wide, being that avant-garde where we're constantly crashing up against icebergs, constantly, trying to smash through the ice, or at the very least maintain position, so that behind us there is a widened cultural space for liberty.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories, as you know, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all the latest information on the Brazilian elections. We have all the topics through countries, the latest videos that we're showing, most important stories from Latin America, our photos, all our opinion articles, and world news as well. So be sure to check it out. And be also sure to join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.